He left me in my wedding dress in the rain. I walked back in and stole the spotlight. Some people think revenge is a dish best served cold. But sometimes it's best served soaking wet, in front of 200 witnesses, with your mascara running and your dignity intact. My name is Dakota Reynolds, and this is the story of how the worst day of my life became the most liberating moment I've ever experienced. October 15th was supposed to be perfect. You know how every little girl dreams of her wedding day. The white dress, the flowers, the man of her dreams waiting at the altar. Well, I had all of that. Or at least I thought I did. The Riverside Country Club looked like something out of a fairy tale that morning. White roses and baby's breath adorned every surface, twinkling lights hung from the ancient oak trees, and the smell of gardenias filled the air. I'd spent 2 years planning every detail, every napkin fold, every single flower petal. My dress was a custom Vera Wang vintage lace with a cathedral train that took 3 people to carry. Felt like a princess. But fairy tales, as I learned that day, sometimes turn into nightmares. The morning started perfectly. My bridesmaids were bustling around me in the bridal suite, fixing my hair, touching up my makeup, giggling about how handsome Michael looked in his tuxedo. My mother was crying happy tears, and even my usually stoic father had gotten emotional when he saw me in my dress. "You look absolutely radiant, sweetheart," he had whispered, kissing my forehead. Michael is the luckiest man alive. If only he knew how wrong he was about to be. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. By 3:45 I was standing in the foyer of the country club, holding my father's arm, waiting for the wedding coordinator to give us the signal. The string quartet was playing Pachelbel's Canon, and through the glass doors, I could see our guests, 200 of our closest family and friends, turning in their seats, anticipating my grand entrance. That's when everything went sideways. The wedding coordinator, a frazzled woman named Patricia who had been running around all day like a headless chicken, came rushing toward us with a look of panic on her face that made my stomach drop. "Dakota," she whispered urgently. "We have a situation." My father's grip on my arm tightened. "What kind of situation?" Patricia glanced around nervously, then leaned in closer. "Michael. He's not at the altar." The words didn't register at first. "What do you mean he's not at the altar? Where is he?" "We don't know. He was there 5 minutes ago and then he just left. The officiant is stalling, asking everyone to please be patient, but people are starting to murmur." My heart began to race. This couldn't be happening. Not to me. Not on my wedding day. There had to be an explanation. Maybe he was nervous and needed a moment. Maybe he was sick. Maybe. "He left a note," Patricia said quietly, pulling a folded piece of paper from her pocket. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably Michael's. The same handwriting that had written "I love you" on countless sticky notes left on my bathroom mirror. The same handwriting that had signed our lease, our mortgage papers, our future. "Dakota, I can't do this. Sorry. I thought I could, but I can't. This isn't about you. It's about me. I'm not ready for this kind of commitment. I need space to figure out who I am. Please don't hate me. I'll always love you, Michael." The paper slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the floor like a dying butterfly. "That son of a bitch," my father growled, his face turning red with rage. But I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. The corseted bodice of my dress suddenly felt like it was crushing my ribs. The world started spinning, and I had to grab onto a nearby pillar to keep from falling. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. "Dakota, honey, what do you want to do?" my mother asked, appearing beside me as if from nowhere. Somehow word had already spread to the bridal party, and they were all there now. My sister Emma, my best friend since college Rachel, my cousin Jessica, and Michael's sister Ashley, who looked mortified. "I need to find him," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sweetheart," my father started. "No, I need to find him. He's probably just outside having a panic attack. This is normal, right? Grooms get cold feet. This is normal." But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. Michael wasn't the type to have a panic attack. He was methodical, calculated. If he left me at the altar, it was because he had made a conscious decision to do so. Still, I had to see for myself. I pushed through the glass doors of the country club, my massive train trailing behind me like a white river. The October air was crisp, and dark clouds were gathering overhead. Something the weather forecast had definitely not predicted. "Michael!" I called out, my voice echoing across the parking lot. "Michael, where are you?" I saw his groomsmen first, his best friend Jake, his brother David, his college roommate Chris, all standing around his black BMW, looking like they wanted to disappear into the ground. "Where is he?" I demanded, marching toward them as best I could in my stilettos and massive dress. Jake stepped forward, his face pale. "Dakota, I'm so sorry. He made us promise not to say anything until after." "Where is he?" I screamed, and that's when the first drops of rain began to fall. "He's gone," David said quietly, unable to meet my eyes. "He left about 10 minutes ago." The rain was picking up now, fat drops splattering against my skin, my dress, my carefully styled hair. "Gone where?" "His apartment. He said he needed to think to get his stuff together." "Dakota, he really is sorry." "Sorry." I laughed, but it came out sounding hysterical. "He's sorry. He left me at the altar in front of 200 people, and he's sorry." The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through my dress, making my makeup run in black rivulets down my cheeks. I could feel my hair falling out of its elaborate updo, curls plastering to my head and neck. "We should get you inside," Chris said, reaching toward me. "Don't touch me," I snapped, backing away. "Don't any of you touch me. You knew. You all knew he was going to do this, didn't you?" The guilty looks on their faces told me everything I needed to know. "How long?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet now. "How long has he been planning this?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "Dakota, how long?" "A week," he whispered. "He told us a week ago that he was having doubts, but we thought he'd work through it. We never thought he'd actually." "A week." A week, while I was confirming final head counts and picking up my dress from its final fitting and writing my vows. A week, while I was excited and nervous and talking about our honeymoon in Tuscany. A week, while he was pretending to be excited about starting our life together. The rain was a full downpour now, and I was completely soaked. My beautiful Vera Wang dress was ruined, the delicate lace heavy with water, the train now a muddy mess trailing behind me. I looked like something out of a horror movie. The ghost bride who haunted country clubs. "Go inside," I told them, my voice hollow. "Go tell everyone to go home. The wedding's off. Dakota, please let us help you. Go." They scattered like leaves in the wind, leaving me alone in the parking lot, standing in the pouring rain in my destroyed wedding dress, feeling like the biggest fool who had ever lived. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, letting the rain wash away my makeup, my hairspray, my carefully constructed facade. I felt completely numb, like my body was there but my soul had floated away somewhere safer. That's when I heard the voices from inside. Through the rain and the glass doors of the country club, I could see the chaos inside. People were standing, talking in hushed, urgent tones, looking around confused. Some were already heading for the exits, but most were still milling about, unsure of what to do. I could make out pieces of conversations as people passed by the windows. "Can't believe he just left her. Poor thing, she must be devastated. What kind of man does that on his wedding day? Always thought there was something off about him. She's better off without him." But then I heard other voices, quieter ones that made my blood boil. "Maybe she drove him away. Probably too demanding, you know how brides get. His mother never liked her. Maybe he found out something about her." That last one made me see red. Found out something about me. What could he have possibly found out that wasn't already known during our 3-year relationship? I was an open book. Sometimes painfully so. I'd never cheated, never lied about anything important, never been anything but devoted to him. No, this wasn't about me. This was about him being a coward. And suddenly, standing there in the rain, looking like a drowned rat in thousands of dollars worth of ruined designer clothing, I realized something. I wasn't going to let him humiliate me like this. I wasn't going to slink away and let people speculate and whisper and paint me as the bride who drove her groom away. I was going back in there. But not as the devastated, heartbroken victim everyone expected to see. No, I was going back in there as Dakota Reynolds, the woman who had built a successful marketing company from the ground up, who had graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, who had run 3 marathons and could deadlift her own body weight. I was going back in there to reclaim my narrative. I walked back toward the country club entrance, my soggy train dragging behind me, leaving a trail of muddy water. The doorman, a sweet elderly man named Frank who had been greeting guests all day, looked horrified when he saw me. "Miss Dakota." "Oh my goodness, you're soaked. Let me get you a towel." "No thank you, Frank," I said calmly, smoothing down my wet hair. "I'm going back inside just as I am." "But miss, you'll catch pneumonia." "I'll be fine." I pushed through the doors and into the foyer. The conversation stopped. Every single person turned to look at me, their faces a mixture of pity, shock, and morbid curiosity. I looked around the room. At my family, my friends, Michael's family, our co-workers, people who had driven from 5 states away to celebrate what they thought would be the happiest day of my life. The string quartet had stopped playing. The only sound was the gentle drip 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 of water falling from my dress onto the marble floor. "Well," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the silent room, "I suppose you're all wondering what happens next." I walked further into the room, my heels clicking against the floor, leaving wet footprints in my wake. People parted like the Red Sea, creating a path for me. "For those of you who haven't figured it out yet," I continued, "Michael has decided he doesn't want to marry me after all. He left about 15 minutes ago to figure out who he is." I made air quotes with my dripping fingers. Apparently he needed space to do that. 3 years of space wasn't quite enough, I guess. I could see people exchanging glances, some looking uncomfortable, others leaning forward with interest. Michael's mother, Patricia, a woman who had never liked me and never bothered to hide it, was sitting in the front row looking smug, as if this confirmed everything she'd ever thought about me. Perfect. This was exactly what I needed. "I know what you're all thinking," I said, walking closer to where the altar had been set up, where I should have been exchanging vows with the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. "You're thinking, poor Dakota. How embarrassing. How humiliating. She must be devastated." I paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with as many people as I could. "And you know what? You're absolutely right. I am devastated. I am humiliated. 3 years of my life, 2 years of planning this wedding, thousands of dollars, and most importantly, my heart. All wasted on a man who couldn't even face me to tell me he was having doubts." I could see some people nodding sympathetically. Others looked like they wanted to be anywhere but here. "But here's the thing," I continued, my voice getting stronger. "I'm not going to let his cowardice define this moment. I'm not going to slink away and hide and let him control the narrative of our relationship." I walked over to where my bouquet had been placed on a side table. White roses and eucalyptus, another detail I'd obsessed over for months. "So instead of a wedding, you're all going to witness something else today. You're going to witness the moment I realized that I dodged the biggest bullet of my life." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "Because let me tell you all something about Michael Thompson," I said, his full name ringing out like an accusation. "In 3 years of dating, do you know how many times he surprised me with something thoughtful? Not expensive, thoughtful. My birthday last year when he got me a book I'd mentioned wanting months earlier, and Christmas when he actually listened when I said I wanted to learn to cook and got me a cooking class." I was pacing now, gesturing with the bouquet. "Do you know how many times I surprised him? I stopped counting after 50. I planned weekend getaways to places he'd mentioned wanting to visit. I bought tickets to concerts for bands he liked. I learned to play his favorite songs on guitar. I cooked his mother's recipes when he was homesick. I supported him through his career change, his father's illness, his quarter-life crisis when he decided he wanted to be an artist for 3 months. Michael's mother was looking distinctly uncomfortable now. I was the one who suggested couples counseling when we hit rough patches. I was the one who initiated conversations about our future, about what we wanted from life. I was the one who brought up marriage in the first place because he was too scared to have that conversation. I could see my own family and friends nodding, recognizing the truth in my words. They'd watched me bend over backward for this man for years. And do you know what he contributed to our relationship? Stability, he always said. He was steady, reliable, safe. I laughed bitterly. Well, it turns out that reliable, safe men don't abandon their brides at the altar. So really, what did I ever see in him? The room was dead silent now, everyone hanging on my words. "I'll tell you what I saw in him," I continued, my voice rising. "I saw potential. I saw who he could be if he just tried a little harder, cared a little more, grew up a little bit. I fell in love with the version of Michael that existed only in my imagination. The real Michael. The one who just left me standing in the rain rather than face the consequences of his choices. I never really knew him at all." I walked over to where his groomsmen were still standing, looking like they wanted to disappear. "Isn't that right, Jake?" I asked, looking directly at his best man. You've all been covering for him for years, haven't you? Making excuses for why he never planned anything special for me, why he never seemed as invested in our relationship as I was, why he always found reasons to postpone taking the next step. Jake shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Oh, come on, I pressed. This is your chance to be honest for once. How many times did you guys have to listen to him complain about me? About how I was too much, too enthusiastic, too romantic, too invested in our future? David, Michael's brother, stepped forward. Dakota, that's not. It's not what? Not true. Then tell me, David, when did he first mention having doubts about marrying me? David glanced at his mother, then back at me. The silence stretched out until it became its own answer. It was months ago, wasn't it? Continued. Probably right after I started planning the wedding in earnest. As soon as it became real, he started panicking. I turned to address the crowd again. Ladies and gentlemen, let me save you all some time and speculation about what happened here today. Michael Thompson left me at the altar because he's a selfish, immature coward who would rather break my heart in the most public, humiliating way possible than have an honest conversation about his feelings. The murmurs were getting louder now. Some people looked scandalized by my bluntness, but others, particularly the women, were nodding in agreement. But here's the beautiful irony of this situation, I said, smiling for the first time all day. In trying to avoid hurting me privately, he's actually given me the greatest gift he could have possibly given me. He's shown me, and all of you, exactly who he really is. And he's freed me to find someone who will actually deserve the love I have to give. That's when I noticed Ashley, Michael's sister, looking absolutely miserable in the front row. Ashley and I had always gotten along well. She was one of the few members of his family who had ever made an effort with me. Ashley, I called out, and she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. You knew too, didn't you? She nodded slowly, her face crumpling. Dakota, I'm so sorry. I tried to talk him out of it. I told him if he was having doubts, he needed to postpone the wedding, not just run away. What exactly did he tell you? Ashley glanced at her mother, who was shaking her head frantically, but Ashley ignored her. He said. She paused, taking a shaky breath. He said he felt trapped. That you'd been planning this wedding like it was the most important thing in the world, and he couldn't figure out how to tell you he wasn't ready without crushing you. So instead he decided to crush me in front of 200 people? I know it doesn't make sense, Ashley continued, tears streaming down her face now. He said he kept hoping his feelings would change, that he'd wake up one day and feel as excited about getting married as you were. But the closer the wedding got, the more panicked he became. And none of you thought to suggest that maybe he should have talked to me about this? I did, Ashley said firmly. We all did. But he was convinced that if he talked to you about it, you'd be able to talk him into going through with it, and then he'd be stuck in a marriage he didn't really want. The room was buzzing now with shocked whispers. This was getting messier and more dramatic by the minute, and I could see people pulling out their phones to document it. Let them. Let everyone see what kind of family they were. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Michael was worried that I, his loving, supportive girlfriend of 3 years, might convince him to marry me by using logic and emotional manipulation. So instead of risking that, he decided to just run away. Dakota. Patricia, Michael's mother, finally spoke up. Oh, please, Patricia, by all means join this conversation, I said, turning to face her. I'd love to hear your perspective on your son's behavior. Patricia stood up, her face flushed with anger. I think you've said quite enough, young lady. This is a private family matter. Private? I laughed incredulously. Private? Your son just left me at the altar in front of 200 people. Nothing about this is private anymore. Michael is a good man, Patricia continued, her voice shaking with indignation. He made a mistake, yes, but you standing here airing our family's business like this is what, Patricia? Inappropriate. Embarrassing. Not as embarrassing as your son abandoning his bride on their wedding day. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could see people leaning forward in their seats, phones definitely out now, recording every word of this confrontation. You never thought I was good enough for him anyway, did you? I continued, advancing toward her. You made that clear from day one. Always with the little comments about how demanding I was, how I had such strong opinions about everything, How Michael needed someone more flexible, more easygoing. Patricia's face was getting redder by the second. I never said. You didn't have to say it outright. It was in every look, every sigh. Every time you suggested that maybe Michael and I should slow down. Or make sure we were really compatible after we'd been together for 3 years. I could see my own mother starting to stand up, probably to come to my defense, but I held up a hand to stop her. This was my moment. Well, congratulations, Patricia. You got what you wanted. Your precious son is free to find someone who meets your impossibly high standards. Someone who won't challenge him or expect him to grow or actually participate in his own life. That's when something occurred to me. Something that made my blood run cold. Wait, I said, a terrible thought forming in my mind. Ashley, when did Michael first tell you he was having doubts? Ashley looked confused. I told you it was. No, I mean specifically. What date? Ashley thought for a moment. It was right after Labor Day. I remember because we were all at the lake house for the holiday weekend, and he pulled me aside after dinner one night. Labor Day weekend. September 4th. My mind started racing. What had happened around Labor Day that might have triggered Michael's panic? And then it hit me. Oh my God, I whispered, the pieces falling into place. Labor Day weekend was when we'd gone to his family's lake house for what was supposed to be a relaxing holiday before the final wedding planning push. It was also when I'd had that conversation with his cousin Emma about kids. Emma had asked when Michael and I were planning to start a family, and I'd mentioned that we talked about waiting a year or two after the wedding, but that I was excited to be a mom someday. I talked about how Michael would be such a good father, how patient and kind he was. Michael had been quiet during that conversation. Quieter than usual. He doesn't want kids, I said out loud, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. The room went silent again. That's it, isn't it? I continued, looking directly at Ashley. It's not just marriage he's not ready for. It's everything that comes with it. The whole life we'd planned together. Ashley's face confirmed my suspicion before she even opened her mouth. Dakota, how long has he known? I demanded. How long has he known he doesn't want children? And just let me keep talking about our future kids, planning our future family. I don't think he knows for sure, Ashley said weakly. He's confused about what he wants. Confused? I exploded. He's confused about whether he wants to have children with the woman he was supposedly going to marry in. I checked my phone. 20 minutes ago. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. This was beyond cold feet or pre-wedding jitters. This was a fundamental incompatibility that Michael had hidden from me. You know what the really sick part is? I said, my voice shaking with rage now. If he had told me months ago that he was having doubts about marriage, about kids, about our whole future together, I would have been hurt, yes, but I would have respected his honesty. We could have worked through it or ended things amicably. I was pacing again, my wet dress leaving a trail across the floor. Instead, he let me plan this entire wedding, spend all this money, get my hopes up, get our family's hopes up, and then he abandoned me like a coward rather than face the truth about what he really wants. I stopped pacing and looked around the room at all the faces staring back at me. Some sympathetic, some shocked, some clearly entertained by the drama. But you know what? I'm glad he did it this way. I'm glad he showed his true colors in the most public way possible. Because now you all know what kind of man Michael Thompson really is. And more importantly, now I know. I walked back to the center of the room, to the spot where I should have been exchanging vows, and I set my bouquet down on the floor. I want to thank you all for coming here today, I said, my voice stronger and clearer than it had been all day. I know this isn't the celebration you were expecting, but it's turned into something even more important. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. Today, instead of watching me make the biggest mistake of my life, you get to witness the moment I save myself from years of unhappiness. Because that's what would have happened if Michael had gone through with this wedding. We would have been miserable. He would have resented me for trapping him in a marriage he didn't want, and I would have spent years trying to change myself to make him happy. I could see several women in the audience nodding, recognizing the truth in what I was saying. So thank you, Michael Thompson, wherever you are right now, I called out, addressing him as if he could hear me. Thank you for being honest about who you are, even if it took you until our wedding day to do it. Thank you for freeing me to find someone who will actually want to build a life with me. I picked up my bouquet and held it high above my head. And thank you all for witnessing this moment, I continued, Because I want everyone to remember this. Sometimes the worst thing that can happen to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened to you. I threw the bouquet into the air, and several women instinctively reached for it. My cousin Jessica caught it, looking shocked and delighted. The bar is still open, I announced with a grin. The food is already paid for. The band is already here. So let's have a party. Not a wedding reception, a liberation celebration. The room exploded into applause and cheers. People were standing up, coming toward me, and I was suddenly surrounded by hugs and words of support and congratulations on my strength and grace under pressure. My mother pushed through the crowd to reach me, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, wrapping me in a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you." My father was there too. His face still red with anger at Michael but beaming with pride at me. "That's my girl," he said gruffly. "Never let anyone treat you like you're not worth fighting for." Even people I barely knew were coming up to me, shaking my hand, telling me stories about their own close calls with the wrong person, their own moments of dodging bullets. But the most satisfying moment came when Patricia, Michael's mother, approached me. I expected her to be angry, maybe even hostile, but instead she looked defeated. "Dakota," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology." I raised an eyebrow. This I hadn't expected. "I was wrong about you," she continued. "You're stronger than I gave you credit for. And my son. My son is not the man I thought I raised." She paused, seeming to struggle with her words. "What he did today was inexcusable. There's no justification for it. And the way you handled yourself." She shook her head in amazement. "You have more grace and dignity than our entire family combined." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. "He doesn't deserve you," she added. "I see that now. I'm sorry it took something like this for me to realize it." As Patricia walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Even his own mother recognized what had happened here wasn't about me not being good enough. It was about him not being brave enough. The next few hours were unlike anything I could have imagined. What started as the worst day of my life transformed into something I'll never forget. The band, after a brief conference with me, launched into an upbeat playlist instead of the romantic ballads we'd chosen for the reception. The caterers served the dinner we'd planned, and the bartenders kept the drinks flowing. People danced. They laughed. They told stories about their own relationship disasters and near misses. The single women at the party took turns giving toasts about independence and self-worth. The married couples shared stories about how they knew their partners were the one, and how different it was from what I described about Michael. My sister Emma cornered me during a quiet moment. "Dakota, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you really okay? I mean, I know you're putting on a brave face, but it's okay to be devastated too. You don't have to be strong for everyone." I considered her question seriously. Was I okay? "You know what?" said finally. "I actually think I am okay. More than okay, actually. Feel lighter. Like a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying has been lifted off my shoulders." It was true. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could breathe freely. "I think I've been trying so hard to make our relationship work that I forgot to ask myself if it was actually working for me," I continued. And honestly, it wasn't. I was doing all the emotional labor, all the planning, all the compromising. I was trying to be the perfect girlfriend, and he was just there. Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I did notice that. At family gatherings, you were always the one trying to engage him in conversations, trying to make sure he was comfortable." Exactly. And I told myself that was just how relationships worked. That someone had to be the driver, the planner, the one who cared more. But that's not how healthy relationships work, is it? Definitely not. As the evening wore on, I found myself actually having fun. Real fun. Not the anxious, performance-based fun I'd been having at pre-wedding events where I felt like I had to prove to everyone how happy and perfect my relationship was. Around 9 p.m., just as I was starting to think about heading home to get out of my soggy dress, Jake approached me. Michael's best man looked absolutely miserable. "Dakota, can I talk to you for a minute?" I nodded and followed him to a quieter corner of the room. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "Something Michael made me promise not to tell you, but after what happened today, I can't keep it to myself anymore." My heart sank. What else could there possibly be? "There's someone else," Jake said quietly. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though part of me had been expecting them. Who? Her name is Melissa. She's a teacher at the elementary school where he volunteers for that reading program. They've been close for about 2 months. 2 months, while I was finalizing catering numbers and confirming RSVPs and writing my wedding vows. How close? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Jake couldn't meet my eyes. Close enough that he's been staying at her apartment some nights when he told you he was working late on that big project. The big project. The one that had kept him working until midnight several nights a week for the past 2 months. The one that had made him too tired for the romantic dinners I'd planned, too stressed for the couple's activities I'd suggested. Does she know about me? Yes. She knows about you, but... He told her you two were basically over, that the wedding was just a formality he had to get through before he could end things. I felt like I might throw up. Not only had he been cheating on me, but he'd been planning to marry me while actively planning to leave me. Why are you telling me this now? Yes. Jake finally looked at me, his eyes full of shame. Because what he did today was unforgivable, and you deserve to know the truth. You deserve to know that this wasn't about you not being enough or him not being ready for commitment. This was about him being a selfish asshole who wanted to have his cake and eat it too. I stood there in silence for a long moment, processing this information. Then, surprisingly, I started to laugh. Jake looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Dakota, don't you see how perfect this is? Said, still laughing. He couldn't even be honest about why he was leaving me. He had to make it about his emotional growth and needing space, when really he was just cheating on me with an elementary school teacher. The absurdity of it all. The dramatic exit, the note about needing to find himself, the months of lying and manipulation. It was almost too ridiculous to be believed. He's probably at her apartment right now, I continued, telling her about how he finally worked up the courage to leave his controlling, demanding fiancé, making himself the hero of his own story. Jake nodded miserably. Probably. Well, good for him, I said, and I actually meant it. At least now he can stop pretending to be someone he's not, and I can stop wasting my time on someone who was never going to choose me anyway. I looked around the room at all the people who were still there. My real friends and family, the people who had stayed to support me through this bizarre turn of events. These were the people who mattered, not the coward who had run away. Jake, I said, a wicked idea forming in my mind. Do you have Michael's number saved in your phone? He looked confused. Yeah, of course. Why? I want you to call him. Right now. Put it on speaker. Dakota, I don't think. Trust me, I said with a grin that probably looked a little unhinged. This is going to be therapeutic. Jake reluctantly pulled out his phone and dialed Michael's number. After a few rings, Michael's familiar voice came through the speaker, sounding anxious and guilt-ridden. Jake, how is she? Is she okay? I know I fucked up, but... Hi, Michael, I said sweetly, loud enough for half the room to hear. It's me. Your runaway groom. Silence. Dakota. Why are you with Jake? I'm at our wedding reception, Michael. You know, the one you skipped out on. We're having a wonderful time, actually. Much better than it would have been with you here. Dakota, please, I can explain. Oh, you don't need to explain anything, I interrupted. Jake already told me about Melissa. Another long silence. I could practically hear him panicking through the phone. It's not what you think. Really? 'Cause I think it's exactly what I think. I think you've been cheating on me for 2 months with an elementary school teacher while I planned our wedding. I think you're a coward who couldn't face breaking up with me like an adult, so you decided to humiliate me publicly instead. And I think you're probably with her right now, playing the victim and talking about how you finally escaped your terrible, demanding fiancé. The room had gone quiet again, everyone listening to this phone call with rapt attention. Dakota, that's not. I never said you were terrible. Save it, Michael. I don't actually care what you said or didn't say. I don't care about your justifications or your excuses. I just wanted to call and thank you. Thank me. For showing me who you really are before I made the mistake of legally binding myself to you. For saving me years of unhappiness with someone who was never going to love me the way I deserve to be loved. And for freeing me up to find someone who isn't a pathetic, cheating coward. Paused, savoring the moment. Oh, and Michael, when you inevitably cheat on Melissa too. And you will, because this is who you are. I hope she handles it with more grace than you handled ending things with me. Though that wouldn't be hard, since literally anyone could handle it better than you did. Dakota, please. Hung up. The room erupted in cheers and applause. People were high-fiving me, patting me on the back, telling me I was their hero. Even some of Michael's relatives who had stayed were nodding in approval. Within hours, videos of my speech and the phone call to Michael had made their way onto social media. Apparently, several guests had been recording the whole thing, and it was spreading like wildfire. My phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. Text messages from friends, comments on posts I'd been tagged in, friend requests from strangers who had seen the videos and wanted to show their support. The hashtags #RunawayGroomRevenge and #WeddingDressStandoff were trending. There were TikToks of people reenacting my speech, Instagram posts analyzing my iconic energy, and Twitter threads about how I'd won the divorce before the marriage even happened. Some of the comments were exactly what you'd expect. Queen behavior. This is how you handle trash men. She said what we were all thinking. Dakota for president TBH. But there were also deeper, more thoughtful responses from people sharing their own stories of dodging bullets, recognizing red flags, and finding the courage to leave relationships that weren't serving them. One comment in particular stuck with me. Watching this gave me the courage to finally end things with my boyfriend who's been stringing me along for 3 years. Thank you for showing us what self-respect looks like. That's when I realized that this whole experience had become about more than just my personal humiliation and recovery. It had somehow become a symbol of something bigger, about refusing to accept less than you deserve, about the power of speaking your truth, about turning your worst moment into your strongest moment. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The story had been picked up by national news outlets, and I was getting interview requests from morning shows, podcasts, and magazines. Everyone wanted to talk to the wedding dress warrior, who had turned her public humiliation into a rallying cry for self-respect. I turned most of them down. This had never been about fame or attention. It had been about reclaiming my dignity and my narrative. But I did agree to a few interviews with outlets that seemed genuinely interested in the broader message about recognizing your worth and not settling for less than you deserve. Meanwhile, Michael had apparently moved in with Melissa and was keeping a very low profile. According to mutual friends, he was devastated by the public reaction and never intended for things to go this far. But I hoped he was devastated. I hoped he understood the consequences of his choices. But the real satisfaction came from the changes I started making in my own life. With the wedding planning no longer consuming all my time and energy, I threw myself back into my business with renewed passion. I started taking the painting classes I'd been putting off. I booked a solo trip to Italy. Not for the honeymoon Michael and I had planned, but for the adventure I wanted to have. I also started therapy not because I was broken or damaged, but because I wanted to understand how I'd ended up in a relationship where I was doing all the emotional work while convincing myself it was normal and healthy. About 6 weeks after the wedding I got an unexpected visitor at my office. Ashley, Michael's sister, was sitting in my waiting room when I got back from lunch. Ashley, what are you doing here? She stood up, looking nervous. I hope it's okay that I came. I've been wanting to talk to you since everything happened. I gestured for her to come into my office and closed the door behind us. How are you holding up? She asked, settling into one of my client chairs. Honestly, better than I ever imagined I could be. How about you? How's your family dealing with all the publicity? Ashley grimaced. Not well. Mom is mortified. She keeps saying Michael made a mistake, and that the public reaction is disproportionate to what actually happened. Dad's barely speaking to Michael at all. And you? I'm proud of you, she said simply. What you did that day, how you handled yourself. It was incredible. But I also feel terrible that our family put you through all of this. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. Why are you really here, Ashley? She took a deep breath. Because I have something else to tell you, and I think you deserve to know. My heart sank. More secrets. Michael and Melissa broke up last week. I blinked in surprise. Already? Apparently, she started seeing the real Michael pretty quickly once they were actually together. The same Michael you'd been dealing with for 3 years. Selfish, emotionally unavailable, unwilling to commit to anything. She told him she wasn't interested in being his rebound relationship while he figured himself out. I couldn't help but laugh. So he's alone. Completely. And he's been calling me, asking if I think you'd ever consider talking to him. He wants to explain himself properly, and make things right between you. What did you tell him? I told him that if he was smart, which clearly he's not, he'd leave you alone and let you move on with your life. You've been nothing but gracious about this whole situation, considering what he put you through. He nodded. That was exactly what I would have hoped she'd say. But Dakota, Ashley continued, I also wanted to tell you that watching you that day changed something in me. The way you stood up for yourself, the way you refused to be a victim. It made me realize I've been accepting way too little in my own life. What do you mean? I've been dating this guy, Ryan, for 5 years. 5 years, Dakota. And he still won't even talk about moving in together, let alone marriage or kids or any kind of future. I kept telling myself he just needed more time, that he'd come around eventually. She paused, shaking her head. But watching you call out Michael for all the ways he'd been stringing you along, I realized that's exactly what Ryan's been doing to me. And I finally found the courage to end it. Good for you, I said, and meant it. I wanted to thank you for that. For showing me what it looks like to demand better for yourself. As Ashley left that day, I felt a strange sense of completion. Not closure exactly, because I wasn't looking to close this chapter of my life. I was looking to celebrate it. This experience had taught me more about my own strength and worth than years of therapy or self-help books ever could have. 6 months after what should have been my wedding day, I was sitting in a cafe in Florence, Italy, journaling about my trip and my life and how dramatically everything had changed. My business was thriving, partly because of the publicity, but mostly because I'd been putting my full energy into it instead of managing a relationship that was slowly draining my life force. I'd made new friends, reconnected with old ones, and started dating again. Though very casually and with much higher standards than I'd had before. I'd also started speaking at events about relationships, self-worth, and the importance of recognizing red flags before they become deal breakers. It wasn't something I'd planned, but apparently my story resonated with a lot of people who needed to hear that they deserved better than what they were settling for. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Emma. Guess what? Michael's on a dating app. His profile says he's looking for someone low maintenance who doesn't need constant validation. Thought you'd find that hilarious. I did find it hilarious but also sad. 6 months later, and he still didn't understand what had gone wrong. He still thought the problem was that I was high maintenance, rather than that he was incapable of being an equal partner in a relationship. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I finished my cappuccino, closed my journal, and headed out to explore more of Florence. I had a cooking class that afternoon, followed by a wine tasting, and then dinner at a restaurant I'd been excited to try. It was a beautiful life. The life I'd built for myself after everything fell apart. As I walked through the cobblestone streets of Florence, wearing a sundress instead of a wedding gown, single instead of married, free instead of trapped, I thought about that day 6 months ago when I stood in the rain feeling like my life was over. I'd been wrong. My life wasn't over that day. It was just beginning. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you really is the best thing that could have happened to you. Sometimes getting exactly what you thought you wanted would have been the biggest mistake you could have made. And sometimes, standing up for yourself in your worst moment becomes the defining act of your entire life. I never did find out if Michael learned anything from our experience. I never found out if he grew as a person or continued to repeat the same patterns with other women. I stopped checking his social media, stopped asking mutual friends about him, stopped caring about his journey altogether. Because this story was never really about him. This story was about me. About finding my voice, claiming my worth, and refusing to let someone else's cowardice define my narrative. This story was about the moment I stopped being the woman who bent over backward to make a mediocre man happy, and became the woman who demanded the love she deserved. This story was about the day I learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stand in your truth, even when you're soaking wet and heartbroken and everyone is watching. And this story was about discovering that your lowest moment can become your highest triumph, if you have the courage to reclaim it. So thank you, Michael Thompson, wherever you are. Thank you for leaving me at the altar in my wedding dress in the rain. Thank you for setting me free. Author's note. This story is a work of fiction, but the emotions and experiences it explores are very real. If you're in a relationship where you find yourself doing all the emotional labor, making all the compromises, and constantly trying to prove your worth to someone who doesn't see it, please know that you deserve better. You deserve a partner who chooses you enthusiastically, not someone who needs to be convinced to love you. Your worth is not determined by someone else's inability to recognize it. And if you ever find yourself standing in the rain, metaphorically or literally, remember Dakota's story. Remember that sometimes the worst day of your life can become the first day of your real life. If you have the courage to stand up, speak your truth, and walk back inside to reclaim your spotlight. Because you are worth fighting for, especially if you're the one doing the fighting.